Hello there, and welcome back to the Disconnected. I am here with Jason Kleeberg of the Force 5 podcast, somebody that I've been following for quite some time. I swear, I flirted with you to get you on this channel forever ago, and it's just now happening. I'm so glad that you're here, Jason.
It's been a long process for sure, but I'm glad to be here too.
When you have two busy people going through a lot of changes in life, it is really difficult to nail down a time, but I'm glad that we could do it. Jason and I are mutual friends. Jason is a longtime listener and collaborator of the Incinerator podcast that I produce, and also a fellow lover of physical media, right?
Yeah, love my Blu-rays, 4Ks, DVDs. Shoot, I still got some VHS and laser discs hanging around somewhere.
I haven't done it yet, but I'm planning on this little museum piece that I'm going to hang in here somewhere that I have no more wall space, so I don't know why I keep saying that. It'll go somewhere else. But I want to show an evolution of physical media. So I've got some laser disc, some VHS. I'm going to go all the way up to 4K, and I can't decide yet if I want it to all be the same title or if I just want it to be a whole bunch of titles that I love, and they're like shitty copies that I can get rid of, basically.
That would be cool. That would be cool. If you do decide to do that, let me know. I'll give you some suggestions.
The laser disc I think I picked out is Body Bags by John Carpenter.
Oh, nice. I just watched like a third of Body Bags the other night.
Body Bags is great. It's super underrated.
Yeah.
Speaking of underrated, we're going to be talking about the Force 5 podcast and then go into a top 10 list of underrated horror. And we were trying to think, like, a lot of eras of horror get talked about a lot. So a period that doesn't really get shined on, primarily because it was kind of a downturn for a lot of horror, but that's the mid 90s to the mid 2000s. And there's still some gems in there, of course. So we're going to try to highlight some of those tonight. But first of all, Force 5 podcast. For everybody else that hasn't heard of it, what is the Force 5 podcast?
Force 5 podcast is a show about movie-related 5 lists that the topic is always changing because the topic is always up to the guest. It's just me and a guest every single episode, and I just kind of ride the guest's coattails of what they're interested in, and it's really fun. You get some really interesting top 5 list topics. You get some really interesting picks too. Like I just did top 5 dogs with David Rosen, and one of his favorite dogs was from Independence Day. I'm like, I didn't even remember that there was a dog in Independence Day. There's just some really cool choices, and you're going to be on there pretty soon.
Can't wait.
I don't know when this episode comes out, but it'll either be before or after this.
I mean, those are the only two options, unless we drop it at the exact same time.
Exactly. And we're going to be doing top 5 Blu-ray releases of 2022, which is going to be really, really fun.
Yeah, and I had a really hard time picking a list for it, actually, because this has been like last year I kind of called a banner year of really incredible releases, and it really hit hard with the quality. I feel like this year we hit the quantity extra hard, and some of them kind of faltered, but thankfully there's still a lot of some really great releases out there.
Yeah, it was a little tough because some of the ones that I know will be on my list on like December 31st are not out yet, and I only wanted to concentrate on those films that are out as we recorded.
Exactly. So collecting, how did you first get into physical media, or is that kind of already been in your vein since birth?
No, not really. Like a lot of physical media collectors, I was around during the video store days.
Nice.
And I worked at a video store, and so I would get the cheap VHS copies, the cheap DVD copies when they got, you order 35 copies of Finding Forrester, and then 2 months later, nobody wants to rent Finding Forrester. So they're like, $5, $2, $3, whatever. Right. And so I amassed this collection of DVDs. And then I started working at Best Buy when I was like 20 years old and started collecting more then. And it's just grown as a hobby ever since then. It turned into a library of stuff that I wanted to watch. And now is also turning into this thing where I have a 4-year-old son now. And someday he's not going to know what physical media is probably someday. Right. Like, streaming will probably be a thing of the past in 20 years, but I'm going to have this library and a couple of functioning Blu-ray and 4K players that he can throw these discs in whenever he wants to and learn about how I learned about movies. And I'll have this like curated collection for him. So that's kind of like why I collect. I also love special features, which we'll get into at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah. I've actually thought about that exact same conversation with my kids eventually. This nostalgia for dad's days when they pop in the Blu-ray disc and see it in like perfect quality, and
Yeah.
it's the same as streaming in 32K or whatever we're going to be in then. But it's astonishing to see the difference that we have for nostalgia now compared to what this nostalgia was when we were like 12, and bunny ears was still a thing, and turning everything to channel 3 before you played Nintendo, and
Yeah.
all those just weird technology changes that is not going to ever be the same ever again. And some of those things our kids will never even be subjected to, thankfully.
Yeah, it's funny the way media changes. Actually, it's funny. My wife and I literally just today we were watching an old episode of Dawson's Creek. Okay, and this is like 98 maybe, that this
Yeah.
97, 98. And my wife, who's a bit younger than me, there's a episode where Dawson is like watching TV and he's flipping through channels, and it comes to the scrambled porn channel. And I don't know if you remember this, but back in the
Of
day,
course.
you'd have these channels that were, unless you had the subscription, you could still look at the channel, but it was just scrambled porn. And I'm like, did you ever do that where you paused it and tried to like catch some nudity on there? And my wife had no idea what I was talking about.
That sweet summer child.
Indeed.
That's fantastic. I mean, special features is a great spot to jump into some of these. What is something that you really love to see on a disc that isn't always there for special features?
Oh, my favorite special feature by far are the director's commentaries, or the film historian commentaries. As an aspiring filmmaker, as an aspiring writer, there's no better film class than listening to the people that did it and how they did it. And there
I
are
agree.
some poor commentaries, but most of the time you're going to get some nuggets of information. And then there are some amazing commentaries with John Carpenter, who we were just talking about. John Carpenter has amazing commentaries, especially his with Kurt Russell, or Roger Ebert's commentary on Casablanca is like one of my favorite commentaries of all time. Amanda Reyes is another great commentator. There's just so many great commentary tracks.
Yeah.
And whenever I see that there's a commentary track on a disc, I'm super excited. It's just the coolest special feature to me. I used to like deleted scenes and alternate endings and stuff like that. Now it's like, I don't, with all this stuff going on, I don't really have time to watch all of that stuff, but the commentaries I will always try to make time for.
Commentaries are big for me, and I really love making of documentaries. It seems like we're getting less and less of those, but in terms of film school, it's like a dramatic retelling of it, basically, which can really enlighten to some of the true problems that can come up on some of these productions that people just never think of. And it's nice to see it's nice to see that those problems existed in like 1974 and today, and we're not just special snowflakes, and it's still bothering us. And some of the drama that happens on some of these, it's a miracle that they get made in the first place.
Yeah, no kidding.
Commentaries. Who is your favorite like modern historical commentator?
Oh geez. Well, I think Amanda Reyes, who I just mentioned, it gives a great commentary. Not only because she doesn't ignore what's happening on screen, but she gets into the contextual things that are happening when the movie was made, in addition to those things that were going on screen. So it's not just a retelling of, oh, here's this person walking into this place, and here's this that I can clearly see. It's the it's the richness of why everything was done, and it's the research that she puts into things. And I'm always stoked whenever I see a commentary by her. Tom Mez is another great one for those. He does mostly like martial arts films and like the Shaw Brothers stuff. I'm sure he's done some of that Asian action. He's a great commentator too. He did Solid Metal Nightmares. He did a bunch of commentaries on those discs. He's
That's
a
such
really
a great set.
Yeah, he's a really good commentary guy too.
Tom Mess is deeply enmeshed in Radiance Films that is just starting up right now. That was the offshoot of Arrow Video.
Nice.
Tom Mess and Kat Ellinger were the two main collaborators that Fran announced with them. And I'm curious, what is a label that immediately jumps to mind that you say, you know what, I love pretty much damn near everything they put out?
Oh, my favorite label by far is Vinegar Syndrome. I had a tough time. So, like we mentioned, we're going to be doing top 5 Blu-ray releases of 2022, and I easily could have picked 5 from Vinegar Syndrome. I had to like really struggle to keep it to two. Um, but yeah, I love the care that they put into stuff, not only in the special features, but also in the packaging, which if you're watching this channel, I'm sure you know about Vinegar Syndrome and the magic they do with
Yeah.
amazing slip covers, the magnetic clasp box, just everything that they do is great to me.
The cocaine that has to be in the ink because we all come dying back to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy when you make a product where people will pay more for the slip cover by itself than the disc originally sold for, you're doing something right. And although I'm not one of those people that will spend $50 on a slip cover, there are
Right.
people that will, and Vinegar Syndrome is knocking it out of the park. I mean, if your product has that kind of following, you're doing something right.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see that it's built up like this, and it's been, I believe January will be like the official start of their 10th year, which is wild to think how far they've come in 10 years. Starting with Herschel Gordon Lewis porn flicks, and now
Yeah.
we're putting out Roadhouse in 4K and some giant limited edition.
Yeah, I never thought I'd see the day. I've been collecting Vinegar Syndrome for about 5 years, and I never thought I'd see the day where they were releasing stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I started just God, probably a little bit earlier than you. It'd probably be about 6 years, maybe 6 or 7, and the stuff that they were putting out was good. But man, the the evolution to Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and Amityville Horror and Roadhouse, it has been a wild ride for sure. But either way, this is not a love fest for Vinegar Syndrome, although we probably could just speak on it for the next 5 hours. What other films are ones that have gotten released recently that you are just ecstatic to finally having such a beautiful package?
You know, the first one that comes to mind is Fright Night from 1985. Fright Night finally got a 4K release. There were three big ones that just came out that everybody's aware of: Poltergeist, The Lost Boys, and Fright Night. And Fright Night was the first one that I tossed in. I had just gotten my wisdom teeth yanked out, and it was like I couldn't do anything, and I had just gotten this disc. And I know you're laughing because we were supposed to do this show, and then I got those
Yep.
wisdom teeth yanked out. But yeah, I tossed it in 4K. It's never looked better than that. I mean, unless you saw it in the theater in 1985, and I was 4 years old then, so there's no way I saw that in 1985.
Even then, a lot of those theaters had dim bulbs, and the screens ripped or something like that. I almost feel like a lot of these, they're better than they've looked literally anywhere else.
Yeah, that's probably true. And in the small town I lived in, I'm sure that theater wasn't like top of the line.
Exactly.
Yeah, just it's such a good movie, and it's the care that Sony. I think Sony put that out was just insane. Like it looked
Yep.
great.
Yeah, Sony is, as far as studios go, they are by far my favorite studio that puts out their own disc still because their restorations are pretty near flawless most of the time.
Yeah, they put a lot of care into those releases.
Yeah, I could not agree anymore. Back to Force 5, I wanted to highlight you just recently had on Jill, who directed the stylist for your Halloween special, and Jill was on my channel right before that, and
I saw that.
she is just an incredible person. That episode was fantastic. Highlight that for anybody that wants to come back on. The topic itself, it's hard because it was 5 different genres. What was the exact topic? Do you remember?
Yeah, the Halloween special is always a little bit of a different one
Yeah.
because it's not like a top 5, it's more like 5 recommendations. And so I pick specific categories. So we had like something possessed, a vampire film, a slasher film, a wild card film, and what was I don't know. Oh, monster slash creature feature. And those rotate every year. So like
Yeah.
last year I had a ghost story was in there. There was different ones, but she was a great guest. And I mean, listeners of this show know she's a great guest. But yeah, she came with it. She came with some deep cuts. I think out
She
of
did.
all 5 of her picks, I had only seen one, which is great. Sometimes people come with more obvious picks. She was not that person. She's a deep horror fan and well worth a listen, even though this comes out after Halloween. I mean, just some great picks.
Well, and a lot of the people that watch this are all about horror most of the year, anyways. And that's
True.
once again why we're talking about horror again tonight, because it's so easy to get entrenched in this genre because it's kind of one of the only genres that's got something for everyone. No matter what your taste is, you can probably find something to love, whether it's art house or splatter trash or even like sci-fi creature features like we were talking about. It's really easy just to grasp onto something. Is there Is there something that originally got you into horror?
When it comes to horror, I was a late bloomer in the horror world. Like, I
Same.
had seen some here and there. You all have the cousin that, like, you go to the cousin's house, and my cousin Chris was the first person that showed me Child's Play because his parents were like, "We don't care what you watch." So that's where I saw Child's Play. But as I got older, gosh, I think the one that really turned me on to horror in the modern era was The Ring in 2002,
Nice.
which I was dragged to. So I watched The Ring and then just started getting more into like Japanese horror because I found out it was a remake. And then the horror train just like went and never stopped. And then I started going back to the exploitation classics and the slasher stuff. And it's just always stuck with me. And like you said, there's something for everybody. At its core, it's about people confronting their deepest fears and prevailing most of the time. And it's really fun. It's also really fun to see, like, again, as an aspiring filmmaker, how they did certain things, especially practically back in the days of like The Thing, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, how did they do that stuff?
Right.
And you don't get a lot of that in like hardcore dramas. It's acting and it's camera work, but with horror, there's special effects that blow your mind.
Well, I'll even throw out there too, comparing dramas to good horror when it's well acted. I still think the acting is better in most horror than in drama because it's a more robust feeling and emotion to portray than just melancholy or joy or something like that. And that's why I always feel like comedians do so well in horror, because horror and comedy toe this very similar line. And the dramatic actors that came up in, I don't want to say this because it sounds like I'm putting them down, but like soap operas or something, it's a craft. I'm not taking that away from them, but it's not really the same thing. You got somebody like Toni Collette in Hereditary. That performance
Should have been nominated.
Exactly.
Crime.
I still
Her
get
and Florence Pugh in Hereditary and Midsommar.
Yeah. I don't understand how Toni Collette's only ever been nominated once, and that was for The Sixth Sense.
Yeah,
That
I know.
it makes
She's
no
amazing.
sense to me.
No.
Anyways, I love all these rants, but this is a really good time to transfer into our top 10 list. So, what I propose we do is, if one of us announces something and it is higher up on the other person's list, let's just mention that and we'll talk about it when it gets higher on the other person's list. So again, the top 10 was 95 to 2005, and we were going for underappreciated. So a lot of mine, they are a little mainstream, but a lot of people still either have never seen these or they just really don't get the love that they deserve. I didn't want to go too deep cut on some of these because of the time frame. I still feel like people just kind of bowed out from horror between 95 to 05. How do you feel about the era in general?
Well, I think this is absolutely the weakest period of horror films. We went from this boon of slashers in the 80s and supernatural stuff in the late 80s to kind of like just a lull. And Scream brought it back a little bit in 96, but then you just had these like Scream knockoffs that kind of populated the land until really the late 2000s when things picked back up. But when I look at like the greatest horror films of 95 to 2005, not even the underrated stuff, even the greatest, if you had said, what are the best of those 10 years, it would be tough to come up with a 10 that would compete with any other era in horror. But there are some underappreciated and underseen gems for sure.
I agree. And I think what kind of led to that potentially is, first off, we didn't have any crazy breakthroughs in horror for quite some time. And that period was very, I'll say samey, I guess. A lot of it felt very same and also very tame. But the other thing, the rest of film kind of had a flourishing period during this time. 1999 is best known as one of the best film years ever. It's easily top 5 film years, and kind of hard to dispute that. But because all of the attention and craft was going elsewhere, there was less put into genre films, and so we had a little bit of a lull. And thankfully, we've come back fairly strong. So I will let the guest go first with your number 10.
All right, number 10 for me. This is a movie that hopefully you've heard of. I wouldn't say this is like a fantastic movie, but I absolutely think it is underrated. and underappreciated. It's a movie called Cut from 2000. Are you familiar with
From
this one?
Australia, I think, right?
Yeah, it's a
Yep.
very Australian movie.
Yep.
It's kind of like, it kind of feels like Australia's answer to Scream 2.
Yep.
This
Isn't
is
Kylie Minogue in that movie or something even?
she's in the
Okay.
beginning of this movie. Yep, she's a horror film director, and she's like fed up with this guy on set who's just not doing what he's supposed to do, and so she's berating him, and then she brings him into the office, berates him there, and he just goes crazy, starts cutting his own face up, and then cuts off her tongue, and that's like how the movie starts.
Right.
And then it's about like anytime anybody tries to screen or attempts to finish this movie, which was shelved, people start dying in mysterious ways.
This is one I've not seen in quite some time. If I remember right, I think it has a physical release through Umbrella in Australia.
It does, yeah. It's never been
think.
released here.
Yeah, and one that would probably get quite a bit of love if I remember right. It seems like something that would be right into modern taste with physical media buyers.
Yeah, it's a movie that you really have to go into expecting that you're not going to see something like great, and I put that in quotes because
Right.
it's really entertaining, but it's also really dumb. But it's like 11% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Right.
An aggregate score, like 1 out of 10 people like this movie. I think it's got to be way higher than that.
Agreed.
And Kimball Rendell, who directed it, didn't really do anything else after this. They're primarily a second unit director on like the Matrix sequels. And they were like second unit on other big films, but never directed another movie as far as I can tell.
Interesting resume though.
yeah, no kidding. But Molly Ringwald's in here. Like there's some good people in this movie.
Very Australian from what I remember though.
Very Australian, both in like tone and in humor.
And not a bad thing. There are some great films from Australia. Some incredible ones. And Umbrella shining a light on a lot of those lately with their releases. So yeah, completely agree. Good pick. My number 10 is Ravenous from 1998.
Got that on my list as well.
Perfect. We'll talk about that one higher then. I love that movie.
I do too.
What's your number 9?
Let's see. My number 9 here, I've got from 2005, right at the end of our time frame here, The Jacket.
I don't know this one.
Okay, so The Jacket is like, it's half mental institution film, half time travel film. It stars, yeah, I know that sounds kind of crazy. I'll give you this setup here. So it has a really great cast, but stars Adrian Brody as this Vietnam vet, or not Vietnam, Gulf War vet. And he gets shot in the head during the Gulf War and recovers. But because of that injury, he suffers bouts of amnesia. And one day he's like on the side of the road. He helps this woman and her daughter after their car breaks down and is immediately picked up by a guy because he's hitchhiking. And he has this bout of amnesia where he blacks out, and all of a sudden, like, the screen comes back on and there's a cop that's dead on the ground, and Adrian Brody has a bullet in him. So obviously they're like, you killed this guy, and they take him to an insane asylum, essentially, and they run tests on him, like experimental drug tests where they pump him full of experimental drugs, and then they stick him in one of those mortuary cabinets. And he finds while he's in there and drugged up, he can travel mentally 15 years into the future. And well, he does this. He's trying to both figure out how to save himself and how to save the girl who he helped out in the beginning of the film. But it sounds outlandish, and it
sounds amazing.
But it is amazing, and it's got a great score. Brian Eno does the score. Wow. It's got a great cast. If you're not sold after this cast, I don't know what to tell you. In addition to Brody, it's got Keira Knightley, Chris Christopherson, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Brad Renfro, and a young Daniel Craig who has dark hair in this movie. You won't even recognize him. Weird. And it was produced by Soderbergh and George Clooney. And if you like, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest mixed with The Butterfly Effect, this is going to be a movie that's going to scratch an itch. It's only been released in France on Region B.
Of course. That is not two titles I'd ever heard associated with each other at all, and now I'm very, very intrigued.
It's really interesting. It's bleak. It's it's dreary, but it's really atmospheric. I love this movie. I think it's really good.
Number 9, we're going to go back to Australia, and one that I think more people have seen because it got a TV series afterwards. But I got to go for the sadistic Wolf Creek.
Oh, good
And
one.
Wolf Creek is, it's got a little bit of a modern following, but Wolf Creek is essentially the story of some kids get lost going across the outback. And really, this movie's not easy to talk about without spoiling because it's really only
True.
one plot point. However, it is one of the more sadistic and not in like a torture porny way, but more in just like genuinely creepy because of how sinister it is type of vibe. And it's one that is filmed really well and filmed in Australia, I believe. And like I said, it spawned a couple sequels and I believe a TV show. So it's one that came with some pedigree and had some great performances in it.
I haven't seen this one for a long time. It really deserves a rewatch from me. I've never seen the sequels. Are they any good?
I have only seen the second one, and it's yes, it's still good. It's just nowhere near as good as the first. But the first one, it's just so heavy. It's really hard to meet that anywhere close to it, unfortunately. And when you see that coming, it loses a lot of its weight. So yeah, it's a little tough to follow that one up.
There's something about the outback that's just scary in itself for people who haven't been there. It's like, it just feels like a nightmare waiting to happen. And Wolf Creek really, really taps into that fear.
That and the heat of Australia and the isolation, it is so well done.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, number 8. What do we got?
Number 8 for me, Guillermo del Toro's monster movie Mimic from '97.
Nice choice.
This was his attempt at a studio monster movie, and this is one of those cases where a Blu-ray really helps out because the version that we saw in theaters in '97, when I was in high school, I went and saw this in the theater, and it didn't really stick with me. I thought it was fun, I thought it was good, but it didn't really stick with me. And I found out afterwards that Guillermo del Toro had a notorious time working for Harvey Weinstein on this movie, to the point where Weinstein, number one, tried to fire him, and Mia Sorvino stepped in to say, no, you can't do that. And number two, he took final cut. So Guillermo del Toro's vision was chopped up in the editing room, and on the Blu-ray there's a director's cut, and it's 12 minutes longer, and it's got some scenes recut. It's by far the superior version. And it's a great what if monster movie about these cockroaches that are they're transmitting a disease through New York City, and they can't get rid of the cockroaches and they can't cure the disease. So they come up with an experimental bug that's going to go in and infect these roaches to essentially starve them out. And they're all females, so they can't reproduce. But what they don't realize is that they find a way to reproduce, and then 3 years later, they have evolved and turned the underbelly of New York City into a colony.
I have never realized until just this moment how much it sounds like Jurassic Park.
Yeah, you're right. You're right with the all-female thing too. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, Mimic is great. One of the things that I love about Mimic now, watching it in retrospect, is how much you can see planted in of Del Toro's career of what he would blossom into, and to see that compared to even The Shape of Water. The differences are stark, but the things that are the same, you can just tell that he had talent from day one, and something that was inherent within him somehow.
Totally. And if you listen, like we were talking about, commentary is my favorite thing on these discs. If you listen to the commentary, he's very frank with his experience on this movie. Not only does he go into the filmmaking stuff, but he does talk about the Weinstein stuff, which is kind of fun.
Oh boy, I don't think I've listened to that commentary. I'm gonna have to.
It's a good one. It's good.
My number 8. Let me say first, there was a lot of sequels during this period of time for horror, and I didn't really want to choose too many of them. But this is one that gets overlooked so damn much in the franchise that I had to pick it because I am so attached to this movie, and that is 2004's Tremors 4: The Legend Begins.
Nice. I have not seen any of the Tremors sequels.
Wow. So Tremors 4 takes you back to the 1800s, and they are mining in Nevada, and it shows where the legend actually begins. And you
Oh,
get
that's cool.
family members of the people that are in the little town where they discover the graboids back in the 90s, and the way that they explore it and go with the Old West style and turn the Old West into a monster movie is so perfect and hit all of my taste that it is a sequel that I freaking worship to this day. I love this story.
Tremors 4, and it's part of like do they have a Tremors box set on Blu-ray?
I think we've got a box set with the first 6, and then Australia, I think it was Umbrella again, released the first 7 or all 7 together. But yeah, in the US, I think we only have the first 6 so far.
Got it. Okay, cool. I gotta watch this. I love the first Tremors. I've just never like had the hankering to go and watch the sequels.
They are really, really fun through and through, because they have basically 2 different eras. The first 4 are very practical effects heavy, and then 5, 6, and 7 are very CGI heavy. They feel very different, but oh my gosh, the way that they hit some of these stories and the evolving character of the villain throughout all of these, it's not just graboids. You got ass blasters, you've got so many different random things that are attacking people. It is such a great franchise. I adore Tremors.
All right. Well, I'm a fan of a good period piece, which
Yes.
you'll be able to know here. What are we on? Number 7, number 6?
We're on 7, yeah.
Number 7 with one that was already on your list, Ravenous from
Nice.
1999. So, well, I'll let you go first because it was on your list first.
Well, one of the things I love about Ravenous is it's kind of a mishmash of genres. I'm a big fan of movies that feel like I can have a big group of people, and most people will be able to find something that they like in this movie and watch it purely for that. And even the drama in this movie is really good. The story itself is really well told. It has an incredible cast of people that grew up to be just amazing actors. But the biggest thing that you already alluded to is the period piece of it all, because it is like very accurately done for the time that they're trying to share, and the way that they set this in some caves and in next to some battlefields and all this, it is just such a really well told story that I swear, like every other year I go back to this thing and go, god damn it, this like might be one of my favorite movies of all time.
It's a great, like, atmospheric,
Yeah.
gosh, what would you even call it? Like an Old West movie mixed with cannibalist horror.
Yeah.
And it's also got a really interesting score from Damon Albarn from The Gorillaz and
Yep.
Blur, which is kind of a critically acclaimed score. But for some reason, this movie doesn't get the views that I think it deserves. And
It
Shout
really
Factory
does.
put out an amazing disc with 3
Yep.
commentaries, deleted scenes, an interview with Jeffrey Jones, which is awesome.
They yeah, that was back when Shout Factory was putting a lot of love into their discs, and it seems like nowadays it's some re-release time, but this is one I would never complain about it coming out in 4K.
No, yeah, true. It would look well, the disgusting stuff would look amazing, and it would look as dirty as ever. Guy Pearce, David Arquette in here, Jeremy Davies, just a great cast. Neil McDonough, who I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah. My next one, what are we on? 7? Yeah, 7. Going to 2001 with a really, really well cast film with The Others with Nicole Kidman and Christopher Eccleston. This one, I think, had a lot of love up through about 2005, and then everybody just ceased to remember that it existed somehow. This is a woman who lives in her darkened old family house with her 2 photosensitive children, becomes convinced that the house is haunted. And the way that Nicole Kidman acts in this film is probably the most I've ever believed her in a film. Not
Yep.
that she's necessarily a bad actress, but damn does she pull off this role. Really well filmed. It does feel kind of like a period piece as well. It's done in a way that feels very authentic to its time, and one that is spooky in a almost like old Hammer horror type of way. I love this movie.
I do too. This was on my Halloween recommendations list last year.
Nice.
And when we did Ghost Stories with Mike Thorne, this was my number 1 ghost movie.
Very nice. Yeah, this is definitely underseen.
Yeah, love this one. All right, well, number 6 here. I already said with Cut, I love a movie with film students. I love movies that center around film students. And Urban Legends Final Cut from 2000, I don't think gets the love that it deserves.
This is in my honorables mention list.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, between Cut and Scream, like, this has a place in horror. And I don't think people appreciated it back then. It was like a satirical Giallo film that just has this absurd urban legend theme from the first one, starting with a girl who wakes up with her kidney removed after being drugged in a bathtub. It's got a great looking killer. It's got cool nods to horror films. It's also got a cool nod to the first urban legend in the final scene of this movie. And if you've ever wondered what John Ottman, the composer, would be like as a director, here you go. He directed this movie. I think it's super entertaining and super tongue in cheek, and I don't think audiences got it because they were looking for like a straight up, another Scream 2, and this went like way more like left field and bonkers.
And this continued the streak of composers directing in the series because Jamie Blanks is a pretty decent composer as well, who did the first one.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's true. I didn't even think of that. Shout Factory also put this one out on disc, and it's got a commentary, a couple featurettes, deleted scenes, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, this one is good. I've always liked the first one fairly decently, but this one is just unique enough to be a little more attention grabbing, I think. And the first one came out in this whole Kevin Williamson era where everything just got absorbed when it felt the same. And I swear, during this time, they had a cast of about 20 people of each gender that they could cast these horror films from. And they all filmed on the same exact camera with the same lens for the
Yeah.
same runtime, with the same fishbowl of plot twist that they pulled out of at the end of these movies. And Urban Legend got lost a little bit in it for me, but the sequel here, it's pretty damn unique. I like the sequel.
Yeah, I like the sequel too.
My number 6, we talked about Vinegar Syndrome quite a bit earlier, and they made a splash by putting this film out on not only Blu-ray, but on 4K. We got a release of Ebola Syndrome. And this movie is underappreciated primarily in the US because it was so difficult to see for the longest time. And now people can watch Ebola Syndrome in glorious Vinegar Syndrome 4K. And I am wowed every single time because Anthony Wong has never looked so good. This movie is gross, funny, weird, not really scary necessarily, but well done in such a way that you will never forget watching this movie. This movie starts with animal cruelty, basically, and then never lets up throughout the entire runtime. You see Anthony Wong coughing on food. You see Anthony Wong literally masturbating into food. What else to go on here? Yeah, Ebola Syndrome is one that's going to sound weird saying it's underappreciated nowadays, but it's still in physical media circles. It's getting a little bit of love now, but for the longest time, this movie went so far under everybody's radar that they didn't even know it existed. And Cat 3 really making a splash, and I think that this is one of the big deals that is leading to that renaissance.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're not a fan of Cat 3 films or Vinegar Syndrome, you probably don't know about this movie, and it is very entertaining. And I'm like kind of bummed that I didn't think about putting it on my list. I had no idea like when it was made, and I figured it was made earlier for some reason.
This is 96.
Wow. See, it feels like 92, 93 to me.
Easily, yeah.
Good
All
pick.
right. Number 5 for you.
Number 5 for me. This is let's see. I'll go with a movie that again fits into the kind of category that Cut does, in that it's not a great movie, but I still think it's super entertaining, and it's certainly better than the 9% that this sits at on Rotten Tomatoes. And that's 2003's Darkness Falls. This is a movie about it's kind of the Tooth Fairy story. It's about this guy who there's this legend of this tooth fairy named Matilda, and 150 years ago she was killed, and she put a curse on the town because she was killed for nefarious reasons. And then 150 years later, in 1993, it's said that when you lose your last baby tooth, Matilda comes into your room, and if she sees you, like, there's trouble. And this kid Kyle sees Matilda, runs into the bathroom where the light is because Matilda can't see the light, and his mom comes in trying to find out what's wrong, and Matilda kills his mom. And then years later, he comes back to that house because the girl who he's interested in, her little brother, is being haunted by Matilda. It is a really, I'm not going to say it's a great movie, but it is really fun. It's very entertaining. The set design is great. The lighting is great. And the soundtrack is great. And if you like Freddy Krueger, you'll probably like the look of Matilda, because when the mask is off, it almost looks like Freddy Krueger. In terms of Blu-ray releases, this was put out by, I think, Image Entertainment put it out with like no special features. So nothing to write home about on disc, but I still think it's a pretty good movie. This is one of those that I got at the video store way back in 2003. And, we watched it and had a great time.
And I believe that Image disc is like very out of print now and very expensive if you ever find it.
That's probably true. Yeah, I haven't seen it anywhere.
No, yeah, definitely one that does not get enough love, especially nowadays. But even 9% on Rotten Tomatoes is egregiously wrong for this movie. It is
so low.
It is so much better than that would say. This is one that is entertaining through and through. Super not unique storyline, and I get that. However, it's a pretty decent setup, and it's actually carried out fairly well for what it could have been. It could have been phoned in, and they really tried on this movie.
Yeah.
My number 5 is I believe is my only remake on here, and that's because I think it gets shot down as one of the worst remakes, but I disagree. I really enjoyed 1999's House on Haunted Hill. And
okay.
That movie is just iconic for me now. The cast is amazing. You got Jeffrey Rush playing the millionaire. You got Taye Diggs actually acting, and not terribly. You got Peter Gallagher, Famke Janssen, Chris Kattan, Ali Larder before Final Destination really took off for her, and then Heroes, of course. But this whole movie tells the story, obviously, about the people that were offered $1 million to stay in a haunted house, and everything that can go wrong does go wrong. And Jeffrey Rush is just evil incarnate, basically. But this movie is great, iconic, has some really, really unique imagery with the way that they filmed the big house up on the hill. Really interesting ending as well. The way that they frame everything, it looks almost gothic and epic in a way that it didn't need to, but it basically frames this as if it's looking the entire city of Los Angeles, and everybody's staring up at this beautiful ending going down. But this one I feel like does not get mentioned enough nowadays, at least.
Gosh, I haven't watched this probably since I saw it in theaters, and in my head I always get it mixed up with The Haunting, which I think came out around the same time.
Yeah, I think that was 98 or 97, so yeah, right around then.
Yeah, I got to check this out again. Taye Diggs, by the way, also great in Way of the Gun.
Yes,
that's like my favorite performance from him. But he doesn't get very meaty roles. Yeah.
No.
All right, where are we at? Number 4 here. Okay, number 4. This one is probably one of my deeper cuts on here. 2005, right at the edge of our time limit here. Reeker. Are you familiar with Reeker?
I recognize the name. I don't know that I've seen it.
Reeker's this supernatural teen slasher that we follow a group of kids who are heading out for the desert they're going to a rave out in the desert, and their car breaks down, so they get stuck at this like roadside motel / diner spot, and then they start getting killed off one by one by this weird creature who you don't really know what it is, but it's only identifiable by its really bad smell. This is a movie that I think is severely underseen, and it is low budget. It has that weird problem that some of those mid 2000 movies had, where it was just like filmed under this puke green light. But other than that, it's a really, really fun movie, and it's got an ending that is just like, it's crazy, and it works, and it's just this twist that I don't think many people will see coming. It doesn't have many people that you'd probably know in it aside from Michael Ironside, and I'm always in for a good Michael Ironside cameo. This was released, I think it was released overseas on Blu-ray. It's only been released on DVD here in the US, and it was a gross looking DVD. It also had a sequel that went straight to video that I haven't seen. But Reeker is this like really propulsive film that if you if you get like halfway in, I think you'll be sold, and then the back half is just crazy.
Interesting. I love that we're talking about this right after another Michael Ironside film got announced as coming from Canadian International Pictures, Mindfield, from OCN yesterday.
Oh, I
Michael
didn't even see
Ironside,
that.
yeah, he's usually pretty great and definitely chews up the scenery in whatever he's in. So I don't think I've seen this one. I'm gonna have to look this one up, I think.
Yeah, you'll have to find it on DVD unless you go region B, I think.
And that was 2005. Is that what you said?
2005, yeah, Reeker.
Crazy. All right, so we're going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum and go back to 95 for The Day of the Beast from Alex de la Iglesia. This got a recent 4K release from Severin, and this movie, if you have never seen it, is glorious. I mean, first of all, like one sentence to sell you on this film. We have a Catholic priest teaming up with a heavy metal fan to commit as many sins as possible to avert the beast from being born. Like, to me, that just sounds remarkable. Yeah, this movie is fantastic and one that is really fun, really interesting, really well shot for 95. And Alex de la Iglesia is just great at what he does. He's also the one that did Perdita Durango that they put out. And I think he just did some TV show for sci-fi, not sci-fi, for Cinemax or something like that.
Oh, you're talking about The Coin?
That's
30 Coins?
it. Yeah.
30 Coins HBO.
Yeah. HBO.
I love 30 Coins. That's an amazing show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had Perdita Durango on one of my lists. I think it was top 5 films by Latin directors. And
Nice.
I've not seen Day of the Beast, so I need to make sure that I put this on my list to watch.
Yeah, this one is fun. It's nothing. It's nowhere near as crazy as Perdita Durango, but it's definitely got some really interesting scenes and actually good timing for this. It's kind of a Christmas movie as well.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. And yeah, I'm sure with Severin's care, it probably looks amazing.
Yeah, it truly does.
Okay, cool. Number 3, right? We had number 3 here. Wow. Okay, top 3. These are all 3 movies that I absolutely love. So my number 3 is going to be from 1996. And you had Alejandro Amenabar's film, The Others, on your list. I'm going to go with his first feature here from 96 called Thesis, or its Latin name, Thesis. It is, or Spanish, because he's from Spain, pronounced Thesis. So this film is amazing. It's, it's like Hitchcockian. It invokes the final scene from Silence of the Lambs. It's a great movie about this film student. Again, a film student movie. I don't know what's going on with me in film student movies here in this time frame. But she's planning her thesis around finding out, like, how would you say it? Audiovisual violence, I think, is the way that she says it. She's researching audiovisual violence and how we consume violent imagery. And so part of her research is finding like the most violent pornographic films that she can find. And she partners up with this film student, and they find this essentially a snuff film. And he recognizes her and finds out she was a film student that went missing like 2 years prior. So now all of a sudden it goes from like her researching stuff to, oh my God, we are like seeing this woman's murder and we have to find out who it is. And they find out from the footage that it's like a certain camera with a certain zoom feature. And so they start looking for who might have killed this woman. It won 7 awards at Spain's like Academy Awards, which are called the Goyas, including Best Screenplay, Best Director, and Best Film. It's a really, really great movie. It's got some great twists and turns. And again, an ending that is amazing. It was put out by Tana Lorne Films, who I'd never heard of. And I believe this disc is way out of print. I couldn't find out any information about it other than it was released at some point. But great movie. If you ever get a chance to watch it, it's Spanish language, so toss the subtitles on. But amazing.
Interesting. I don't think I've heard of this one even. surprising with how much I love the others. Yeah, that's definitely one I'm gonna have to look up, and I bet that disc is very expensive now.
It probably is. He had a run though with, I mean, he started with this, and then he had Abre los Ojos, which was turned into Vanilla Sky here in the
Yeah.
US like a couple years later, and then he had the others, like this 3-film run that's just mind blowing.
Uh, that's what I'm getting at. I mean, during this era, some other filmmakers just flourished, but genre cinema really just seemed to falter.
Yeah.
My number three, we are going to stay foreign and go to Korea for 2003's A Tale of Two Sisters.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
this movie is perhaps gaining a little more traction nowadays, again, because Arrow Video recently put it out. But this one is a very well done ghost story with two sisters living in a home with some really creepy imagery. The most famous one being the dinner scene and seeing an entity essentially under the kitchen sink. And as they go to do that, there's this really effective jump scare. The ending is interesting, if not a little nonsensical for some people, with the stepmother coming into play and some potential mental illness problems potentially being there. But really well made film, really well told story. But the most amazing thing is the acting for these two girls is astonishing. It is an effective story. It is one that a lot of people can relate to, just because it's sort of in this time that it could be viewed as like a coming of age film, and it is sold in such a way that it is this unique little passport to a period of time where this family is just being held hostage with this ghost story. So I love this movie, and I think a lot more people need to see it for sure.
I haven't seen this for a very long time, and I don't remember anything about it. I didn't know that Arrow had put it out, so I need to probably get on that.
Yeah, I think it came out in the near the end of 2020.
Okay, cool.
Really nice, one of their soft touch slipcovers even.
Okay, cool. I'll have to pick that up. My
I
number
think we're
two
on
here.
top two.
Oh, yeah. My number two here, film I love. Again, 2005 was a really, really great year for Wes Craven. I could have put either one of his movies on here. I chose to go with Red Eye here at number two.
Nice.
The other one that he came out with was called Cursed, and that was one I considered putting on here, but I'm going to go with Red Eye, one of his last movies. I think this is an awesome thriller. It's not so much horror, although there are there's a lot of nonstop tension in this movie.
Yep.
And there are some like horror scenes, but it's basically Rachel McAdams plays this hotel manager who's on a flight from Dallas to Miami, and she has a drink at the hotel bar while she's waiting for her flight, meets this guy, and it turns out he's sitting next to her on the plane. And he's played by Cillian Murphy. And you find out very shortly after they get in flight that he's an assassin, and he's trying to assassinate a political figure who's staying at her hotel, and he needs her to help him set it up. And if she doesn't listen, well, he's got her dad, Brian Cox, held hostage. I'm a huge Rachel McAdams fan.
Same.
She's one of my favorite actors. I love her. And so seeing her in this playing opposite Cillian Murphy, who's also amazing, it's fantastic. It's like nonsensical in a lot of points, but this cat and mouse game where they're literally sitting next to each other and she's trying to delay the inevitable it's amazing. And it all happens on this like 3-hour flight until they land, obviously. And it's like 90 minutes long, so it's a brisk watch. It's just really good. This has for some reason, never been released on Blu-ray. I have no idea why. It's like one of my probably top 5 that haven't been released on Blu-ray.
Yep.
The DVD is really good though. It's got a commentary from Wes Craven and Patrick Lussier, who is the editor on this film. It's got a couple of featurettes, but for some reason, never on high def.
I long for this movie on Blu-ray. This is
so good.
Absolutely one of my favorites. The performances in this are amazing. The climax of this film is way better than I expected it to be. The Rachel McAdams performance is one of her better performances, genuinely. And the Wes Craven of it all. How do we not have this movie on Blu-ray? It makes zero sense.
Yeah, I can't believe that Shout hasn't put it out.
Right. And perhaps because they just did Cursed, maybe this one's still in the pipeline and it's coming soon, but hopefully, I mean, they're more interested in 4K re-releases recently. So we'll
I
see.
know this would be a day one purchase for me.
Yeah, same here. My number 2 is a very sleazy one, and looking at my list, I really love 1995. I guess I picked Castle Freak, and I love Barbara Crampton and Jeff Coombs in this. This is where Jeff Coombs plays somebody that inherits a castle in Italy. What a terrible problem to have. So he moves to Italy to live in this castle, and turns out it is a terrible problem because, of course, they're not alone in this castle. And this movie. Not much I'm going to say on it because it gets dirty. Not in like well, I was going to say not in a sexual way, but it is kind of a sexual way. But it's a very sleazy movie. But this is one of the most effective full moon films ever, in my opinion. In fact, this is probably one of their only 2 films that I really love that Full Moon produced and put out.
What's the other one? Puppet Master?
Tourist Trap.
Oh yeah, shit, I forgot they did that.
Yeah, Tourist Trap and Castle Freak. These are like I won't even call it guilty pleasures, but when Full Moon can try, this is what they get, and it's pretty damn effective. And there was a remake of this movie that came out fairly recently, and I say skip that entirely and watch this movie twice.
High endorsement, high praise.
What about Castle Freak? Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't. And for some reason in my mind, I always thought it was another one that came earlier. I did not realize that this was made in 1995.
Yeah, well, when you watch it, it feels earlier, and it's done in a way that's got that 80s sleaze factor to it. And Barbara Crampton, top of her game, as she always is, but Jeff Coombs, probably one of his better performances. He's not always super believable, but in this one, because he does play more of a neurotic character, it really works for him.
Okay, I'm a big Barbara Crampton fan, so I'll have to check this out. Who you said Full Moon put this one out?
Yep, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, normally their discs aren't 100% great, but
yeah,
I mean, I'm sure I can probably find it cheap.
Absolutely.
Okay, number 1, grand finale time here, huh? I genuinely love this movie. I've loved it since the first time that I saw it in the theater, and this one holds a special place in my heart because it was the very first DVD I ever bought. Back in 2001, Joyride, starring Paul Walker, Leila Sobieski, and Steve Zahn. Are you a Joyride fan?
Funny enough, I have never seen Joyride, and I'm laughing because this is the second time this week that this has come up on the channel.
I love Joyride. For those not initiated with Joyride, it's about these 3 people that, well, Paul Walker, he's going across the country to pick up his like love interest, Leila Sobieski, and then Steve Zahn is her brother, and he hitches a ride. And so they're on a cross country trip. He's kind of Steve Zahn's kind of like a clown, and there's a CB radio in this car they just bought. And so he starts messing around on the CB radio with his little handle. He says his handle's Candy Cane, and they mess with a guy whose handle is Rusty Nail, and they mess with the wrong trucker. And it leads to there's a climax in the hotel that could be straight out of Saw. Nice. It's directed by John Dahl, who did like Red Rock West with Nicolas Cage and Rounders, so it's in good hands. Co-written by J.J. Abrams from like Star Trek, Star Wars. And like I said, 2001, this was the very first DVD I ever bought. The DVD was one of the selling points was it had 4 alternate endings, and it had 3 director's commentaries. So these were probably the first audio commentaries that I ever listened to. Because when I worked at the video store, a lot of the discs we got were like rental copies, and they didn't have the special features on them.
Right.
So 3 audio commentaries. It's not as gory as a lot of horror films are, but it's so much fun. And the 3 characters that you spend most of the time with have some great chemistry in the car. The villain, Rusty Nail, he's kind of like a Jaws type of character, whereas like you don't see him very much. You might not even really see him at all. It's just like, you know, he's there, you know, he's coming. And it's just a great voice too. Great movie. 2 direct-to-video sequels. Again, I have not seen the sequels, but Joyride, man, needs a disc. I think at one point it was released on like bare bones Blu-ray, but I can't find it anywhere. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's a few things on this one. I would imagine if this came out 3 or 4 years later, they would have forced a whole lot of gore into this movie.
Yeah.
Based on when that came out. The disc-wise, I would not be surprised if this came out soon, and even if it wasn't through something like Scream, some sort of like triple pack with the sequels and everything built in would probably make a lot of sense, even with like 88 films or something like that.
I would love it. This movie deserves it.
My number one, yours was from 2002, I believe, right? 2002?
2001.
Oh, 2001. Okay, so mine is from 2002, and it is one. I'm not going to say a whole lot about the plot because nobody has seen this movie, it seems like, and everybody that hasn't needs to go into this blind because it's genuinely a good thriller. Most underappreciated film during this era for me is 2002's The Mothman Prophecies.
Oh, Richard Gere?
Yeah, and Laura Linney. This is basically somebody has to go in and to investigate a lot of strange things happening. And based on that synopsis, you can understand there's a lot of random things that happen that would kind of spoil a lot of the reveals. This is just a really well acted movie. Richard Gere, probably his last decent performance, as far as I remember, and one that, again, was never on Blue until recently through Imprint. And because of that, hardly anyone has seen this film. This has gone largely ignored since about 4 months after it was released.
Yeah. This is one of those that I saw from the video store.
Nice.
I might have seen this in theaters too. This and Unfaithful, I think, are Richard Gere's like last good roles. Yep. You're right there. But yeah, I haven't seen this for a long time. I need to revisit it. This one is being put out soon, isn't it?
It was put out by Imprint in Australia.
Got it. Okay.
Which means difficult to find over here unless you're willing to pay. And Orbit might have it, but I'm not sure if the limited edition is sold out by now, and they're kind of finicky with standard edition. So that always poses a small problem, at least. But that's it. Did you happen to have a list of honorable mentions that you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I got a couple. And I actually think it's really fun and interesting that we only had one crossover out of 10 films each. We had like 19 underrated films from this era. That's awesome.
Same.
Hollow Man from 2000 was on my honorable mentions. A great Kevin Bacon role. Cursed, like I mentioned, from 2005. I just wanted to have one Wes Craven film on there. Those are probably my two main ones. And if you think Scream 2 is underrated, then Scream 2. But a lot of people, including me, think Scream 2 is one of the better entries.
Same. I've got one of those that is highly rated, but I still think is underrated. I'll say The Ghost in the Darkness from 96, still one of my favorites. The original Funny Games from 97, really underseen and just a great movie. I know in our circles it is widely known as a great movie, but The Faculty still does not get enough love. That movie is really well acted, really tense, and a genuinely good like final climax on a film like that, which they usually would falter at. And it works really well. Super effective. What Lies Beneath from 2000. Really good one.
Oh, yeah.
1 Hour Photo. Robin Williams from 2002.
Oh, I forgot all about that one. I love that movie. That's a great Robin Williams performance.
And then my last one, which is the highly rated one. I still think not enough people give enough love to the Blair Witch Project. That movie changed cinema, and it doesn't get heralded as this game-changing movie that it truly is. And unfortunately, still underseen, especially by these up-and-coming generations, I think.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. That was one that I saw in high school in the theaters, and it was really polarizing among my friends.
Nice. Jason, thanks for your time. These top 10 lists, I think, were super effective. I'd love to have you back on to do something like this because this is great.
Yeah, definitely. Top 10 lists, man. That's like double my normal workload at Force 5.
Well, go home, take a break, have a good night. Appreciate your time. And everybody, please subscribe to Force 5. I've got all the links in the description below as usual. And until next time, from two collectors to all of you, have a good night.